And from now on, I'm going to introduce you how to filter your rows based on specific criteria. And what we're going to use is the function named as filter under the dplyr package. Imagine that you are only interested in the responses from the artist named as Destiny Child. So what you can do is paste new variable to save your newly formed data. Use the filter function under the dplyr package. Again, the first argument in the sentence should be your original data, your raw data, and then because you are judging the value of this column equals to Destiny's Child, we're using two equality marks to judge whether a value of a variable is equals to a specific value. So remember that these two equality marks represent it is judging whether the value is equals to something. So do not use only one equality mark here. So let's run it and see what will happen. This one. So here we filtered out only 3 rows based on the artist's inverted equals to the Destiny's Child's value. So it would represent all of the other columns for the same artist. Sometimes we also need to specify multiple conditions within the filter function. We can combine the conditions using either AND or OR statements under the filter function. So for example, when you selected out the Destiny's Child's response and you only want to select the rows that the value for the first week's response is larger than 75, we say. So we can use the AND argument within the filter function. Let's see, my data filter rows equals to, again we use the filter function here, and our original data set. Again, we want to select the rows for the Destiny's Child's artist, and what we also want to set is the criteria for the first week's value. So we type the first week equals to, larger than 75. This time when we are selecting the values larger or smaller than some specific value, we only use one mark, but not two, like when we are judging whether the variable is equals to some specific value. So we only use one mark, comparison mark. And let's see, in our new data set, there are only 2 rows because there is one row less than 75. So we select the rows that the first week's value is larger than 75. Okay, and function, we can here use AND mark instead of the comma, and there would be the same result. But sometimes we are interested in not only one artist's value. For example, I'm also interested in the Santana's response. So here we are going to use the OR function, OR argument under the filter function. So here we are not only just interested in Destiny's Child's response, we are also interested in Santana's response. So here we use this mark, this straight line represents OR function. In the newly formed data set, we not only get Destiny's Child's response, we also have the Santana's. Definitely, there will be also other ways to select specific rows. For example, you were interested in the first 50 observations of your data set. You could use the function, the argument like slice your data plus the rows or observations or items you're interested in, for example, the first 50 rows of data, you can use it. Like you form the new data set and using slice function, and again your original data set name, my data, and first 50 rows. Let's see, only 50 items or observations of your data set are selected. And sometimes you may consider about selecting the minimum or maximum values of a specific variable, like you are only interested in the minimum or maximum value for the first week's response. You may consider about using the slice main or slice max function to select the highest or lowest value of a variable. Again, you need to write down the original table and then add the criteria value for interested variable, like the first week's value, similar to for the max values. For example, you're interested in the minimum value of the second week's value, then you can write down your original data set plus the variable you're interested in, and let's see what will happen. You selected the minimum value based on their second week's value. I selected the minimum value for you. And sometimes you may want to make your original data set as the whole population and you want to take some samples from it. Then you may want to randomize your data set. Then you can use the slice plus sample. And again, your original data set name and some specific number, namely you want to select how many rows of it as a sample from the population. The population should be the original data set. For example, we want to select 10 items of it, so I could choose the filter rows as slice sample from my data, the original file, the original data set, and n equals to 10. Let's see, in the filter rows, in the filtered data set, we will get 10 randomized chosen rows from the original data. And if you want to select 20 of them, you can change the number after n, and you would get 20 of it. And in addition to this, you can also select the percentage of your data set, like you want to select 10% of your original data. Here you could change just from n to probability. For example, you want to select 10% of it, and you can type 0.1. There's 31 rows, and for our original data set there are 700. Okay, let's back to the first step for why we need data wrangling. We notice that there are some NA values, missing values for our data set. This may be because of the limitation of data collection or research methodology. So how we replace these null values into specific zero values, for example, for further your data analysis in different statistical analysis methods. First, what we need is also the package name as dplyr, and because it is one part of the larger package named as tidyverse, so the safe way is to also we also elaborate the tidyverse package when we're using the dplyr package. So let's replace the values with 0 at 0. But please remember that this data set likely has NA values because of maybe the limitation of data collection or data experiment design or experiment methodology. So replacing with 0 makes some sense for analysis, but remember that we need to keep the original data saved if you need to distinguish 0 from NA. You always keep the original data. So my dataset is named as my data percentage mark plus larger than mark plus percentage mark. This is the fixed sentence, so please remember it when you are going to tackle with the whole data set, and using mutate function to go across your dataset, and use where function to judge whether it is a numeric or not. Is numeric, and replace the NA values as in your data set as 0, and you are going to replace the NA values with 0 NA function. So we run it and see all NA values would be replaced by 0. Here is the method to replace all NA values from NA to 0 in your data set. But what if you only want to replace the NA values for only the first week's value? You could also use the mutate function, but this time you're not going to write down that March, and this time you are going to focus on only the first week's value. So you select the first value and replace only the NA values for this variable from the first week's value equals to NA to 0. Because I just replaced my data, so I need to update it originally from the original file. So I rerun the read CSV function here to load the original file, and let's see, after run it, all values for the first week would not be any NA values anymore, but for the other weeks you should also keep the NA values, because I only liked the mutate function to replace NA values for the first week's value. You can choose for example the second week's value and use the bracket to judge whether the value is NA. If it is, give it 0. And this time you can see that all of NA values for the second week's value should be replaced by 0. Okay, here are the methods how we could do data wrangling in R before we do the data analysis. First, I introduce you how to select specific columns and rows based on specific criteria, and then I introduce you how to replace the NA values for specific columns or specific variables in R to replace them as a specific value. It is of vital importance that you need always keep the original dataset saved. Better to save it in another path, because you may continually keeping reorganizing, revising your data. There might be some mistakes when you tackling with your data analysis, so always keep in mind that keep your original data set saved better in another path. Okay, thank you, bye bye.